Hello. My name is Georgia Court. I'm the proprietor at bookstore number 1 in Sarasota. And I'd love to welcome you all to our chat with Zoe Fishman today. Before we get started, just a little housekeeping that I'm going to ask you to do. Please keep yourselves on mute. Once Zoe and Elsie are done with their chat, then we will have a question and answer period, and you'll be permitted to, I'll ask you then if you like, to unmute, and then you can ask questions and converse with Zoe and with Elsie. Also, in the chat, at the very top of the chat, is a link to purchase Zoe's new book. So if you're interested in that, you can just click on that within the chat, and that'll take you directly to bookstore 1 Sarasota to purchase the book, either for pickup or for delivery wherever you are. Okay, but we're going to go ahead and get going with introductions. We have with us today Zoe Fishman. She is the best-selling author of Inheriting Edith, Driving Lessons, Saving Ruth, and Balancing Acts. She's the recipient of myriad awards, including a New York Post pick. She's been profiled in Publishers Weekly and the Huffington Post, among others. Her writing has been published in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as part of their moving personal journey series, and in the New York Times as part of their Modern Love series. Zoe worked in the New York publishing industry for 13 years. She was recently the visiting writer at Savannah College of Art and Design in Atlanta, and currently teaches at Emory Continuing Education and the Decatur Writers Studio, where she is the executive director. And to cap it all off, she's the winner of the 2020 Georgia Author of the Year Award, which sounds like a very big thing because it is. She's going to be in conversation with Elsie Souza of Bookstore 1. Elsie has been the bookstore's events manager since we opened our doors in 2011. Originally from Massachusetts, Elsie began her career as a special needs teacher, then managed Congressman Barney Frank's office for over a decade before she and her husband moved to Sarasota. Elsie, as some of you know, some of you may be from town and know the bookstore, Elsie is known as the heart and soul of Bookstore 1. So please welcome Zoe Fishman and Elsie Souza.
Well, so it is such a pleasure to meet you, and I love you from reading this incredible book. So let's talk about, first of all, the title, Invisible as Air, and how it developed.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Invisible as Air was not the original title of the book. At this point, I'm having a hard time. Oh, the original title of the book was Rite of Passage, but it was RIGHT instead of RITE to tie in with her son Teddy's bar mitzvah, and also the rite of passage that the death of a loved one is into this new world that you did not want to exist in the first place. But the sales force didn't like it, which is often the case with your first title draft, and asked me to come up with something new. And the whole reason that Sylvie becomes addicted to oxycodone is because she feels invisible as air. No one, for the most part, everyone is pretty self-involved. So drug addiction can go completely unnoticed if you're able to manage your life. People see what they want to see. So that's where the title Invisible as Air came from.
So let's set the stage for people who have not read the book. And I think you have some real fans in this audience on both sides of the family, which is like very cool. And I think your Uncle Mike is a friend of George's and has played with him here in Sarasota. So I'm sure somewhere he's lurking.
Yeah.
See, I knew that. So can you set the scene for us of this little dynamic family and the characters in it?
Sure. So Sylvie is married to her husband. They've been married for about 15 to 20 years. They have a son named Teddy who's 9, and they have 2 years ago suffered the stillbirth of their daughter. And it was a very traumatic stillbirth. She carried the baby to term, and there were no inclinations that there were problems with the baby until she gave birth to her. And instead of dwelling in the sadness, because really, who can do that? Who has the freedom to do that? Everyone has a life to live and a house to run and jobs to work. She stuffs it way down inside of her, that grief. And her husband, in the meantime, to deal with his grief, he becomes a wannabe triathlete and falls off his bike to break his ankle. The doctor prescribes him oxycodone for the pain. He doesn't want it. And so Sylvie thinks, oh, let me just take one. Let me see what the big deal is about. And she loves it. She's not angry anymore. She's relaxed. She's nicer to her family. She doesn't care what people think of her. And soon it becomes a very real addiction. And you watch her spiral from the bottle of her husband's to stealing it from people's homes, calling in fake prescriptions. And at the end, towards the end, she has her final lowest moment, and still doesn't want to get help until she's forced into it.
Well, I was struck by the fact that she dealt with it with the OxyContin, and her husband, meanwhile, became a triathlon.
Yeah.
And bought it sounded to me like he bought every equipment that was ever known in the world.
Right. So you have these 3 people, if you include Teddy, the son, who fills it with movies, but they're all trying to fill the void of this little girl's absence.
Yeah, and you know, and maybe, I know it's difficult to share, but the fact is, I wondered as I read it, I knew there had obviously been a tragedy in your life, but I didn't realize it until I read something afterwards, because you so captured the feelings of someone who was in total grief. And perhaps you want to share, first of all, you know, your own sadness and how it changed how you wrote this book.
So when I originally had the idea when my husband was alive. I had known women who had suffered stillbirths and had seen their pain both up close and from a distance. And as a mother of 2 little boys, I honestly could think of nothing worse. Just because the stories of returning to work and people asking how the baby is, but there's no baby to show for it. Plus you have the physicality of birth. Your breasts are producing milk, but there's no baby to take it. I couldn't, the hormones, the sadness. And I had been pretty lucky in my life. I had never experienced real tragedy. I'd had bad days, and then my husband left for work one morning and never came home. He suffered an AVM brain aneurysm. And he went into a coma for a week and he died. And meanwhile, I had this book to write, and thank God I had it. It was always I didn't understand the depths of grief. So writing this book helped me work through them.
And thank you. I know how difficult that was for you to say. And I shared with Zoe earlier, the fact is, when I read it, I certainly understood it because I lost my only child 27 years ago. And so I read it as someone who had suffered grief. And I realized that, you know, Sylvie, the OxyContin for her brought her out of that grief.
Yes. Yeah. It numbed all that pain.
Exactly. So you can almost see, did you know anyone who was on OxyContin? Did you do research on it, or how did it?
I did research. I'd also had two, given birth to two boys, and I was given a prescription when I left the hospital both times. And I was lucky again. I didn't have much pain, but I sure did like those pills. And
Yeah.
I thought, and I have an addictive personality, so I knew that if I had had access to them, I would have been in real trouble.
So what I loved, and for people who have not read the book, I encourage you to read it. And, I know it's about a very profound, grief is hard to deal with, but so I have to tell you, I loved the characters in your book.
Thank you. I
used them. I loved it. I loved Bubby and Zadie, and I loved Granny and Pop and Morty and Beverly.
Morty.
I love more and Beverly,
Yeah.
I especially loved when Bubby mentioned at the bar mitzvah that she had on Spanx. I thought that was very cool. And it took some of the grief away, which was really wonderful. And so for, writing about grief, some of the pain came away with the description of these marvelous people. And I think that Zoe might be frozen somewhat there. Georgia, is there something we can do?
No, there's not anything that I can do. That's probably
Okay.
Zoe's internet connection.
Okay.
Nobody else is frozen on the.
Okay. All right. So I'll just continue. So here we have this incredible family of Paul and Sylvie and Teddy. He's an only child and he's preparing for his bar mitzvah. So his mother has insisted that he work, I believe it's at a vet, and he's taking care of animals and he hates it. But meanwhile, he meets this incredible young woman named Crystal, who, I think she has green nails and probably pink hair and the whole 9 yards. He's never met anyone like her. And they become friends, and she's really incredible. And she brings Teddy very, very far in the story. But meanwhile, Sylvie, after finding her husband's OxyContin, she continues down a path, and she uses all of his OxyContin, and then she finds other sources of OxyContin. And she steals from her friend. She steals from her husband's friend. She has a mini affair, if you want to call it, with her husband's friend to get OxyContin. But meanwhile, she's really happy. But Teddy knows what's going on. And he's the catalyst in this story. But for all of you, and I know for her family, that Zoe has written a profound book that we were speaking before we went on air about the fact that it's been translated into other languages, and in Israel has become a bestseller. And so I think Zoe, for me, she touched the chords of who she is as a Jewish woman. She touched chords of being a mother, of grieving, of being this incredible person. And, the physical pain and the mental anguish that goes along with what Sylvie was going through was quite something. So, I wish we had Zoe on so that we could discuss it more. But when I was speaking about, yes, honey.
Can I just interrupt you for a minute?
Yes.
Zoe is still not coming back on, even though I have resent her a link. Some of
Okay.
you are her close relatives and probably have her phone number. Could one of you call her and just let her know that I sent her a new link via email?
Excuse me, I see her
gone.
picture.
I'm
She's
sorry.
back.
She's come back
Oh,
in.
there you are.
Okay, great. Good
Now I'm in
news,
San
Zoe.
Francisco.
Okay, all right.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened.
Don't be so, oh, I love the background now. Look at
I
this.
don't know, my kids put this on my phone. I don't know how to take it off.
Oh, but I love it. Now we're in San Francisco.
Yeah.
This is gone. We've gone from, yes, we have gone to the other coast. This is very good. We'll always remember this because, to be honest with you, Zoe, I have done hundreds of events, but dealing with Zoom is like
Yeah.
nothing that you ever know what's going to happen.
Well, you're doing incredibly well, and I apologize for that, but I'm back. I'm here.
Okay, this is great. So let's continue. So tell me about all these characters. I love them. I love them. I love this family.
Thank you.
Tell me where they came from. I'm sure they're bits and pieces of people you know.
Yeah, it's when I write a book, I'm very organized. I keep a very pretty strict outline, and so I know where I'm going. It's my road map while I write. So I have the puzzle pieces, but the secondary characters are never part of the plan, which is what I really love about writing. They kind of invent themselves out of what's going on in my head, in my heart, what's going on in the world. I think they're a great way to bring out the realness of the protagonist and the primary characters. So Morty, as I was writing Invisible as Air, my father got very sick. And it wasn't until I read the book that I realized that Morty was my dad.
Oh.
Yeah, and he died sadly, but that was kind of the way I was writing through the pain of losing him.
Well, I loved Morty and I will love him forever knowing, that is your dad.
Yeah.
And, what a great thing. And was Bubby and Zadie, were they like people you knew too?
I mean, they're just the best Jewish grandparents. They're
Oh.
an amalgamation of all the Jewish aunts and uncles and grandparents I've ever had or seen. Yeah,
What-
and then they were, I come from, my mother converted to marry my father. So I knew both sides of the coin in terms of culture. And so that's where his parents came from.
Oh, what a wonder. So it was dedicated to all of them in the end.
I hope so. I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm a writer, but I'm very affected by the people that come into my life. Not all of them, obviously, but certainly the ones that I love. And so just writing about different cultural experiences and the way that affects how you perceive the world, that's one of my favorite things to do with characters.
So you have carried that through your entire career then, right?
Thank
From
you.
day one. Oh, and that's what I loved best. So I share that with your family, but also whoever's on with us on Zoom, just to enjoy these remarkable people, dearly loved, as you have been dearly loved too. This is great.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, that's true.
So it could be this story of Sylvie and Teddy and Paul. It could be the story of anyone, and it could be your neighbor's story, your friends, someone in your family, and it
Could be your
struck me.
own story.
Yes, and I was struck reading it that through this pandemic, it's almost the story I thought of what we have been going through as people. And I wondered, in family dynamics, it might not have been a stillborn, but how people might have turned to OxyContin or something else?
Oh my God, absolutely. It's been relentless. I think, my experience as a single mom with 2 kids, it feels like Groundhog's Day, but in the worst way. There's certainly been bright spots, but it's been so challenging. You're not supposed to spend this much time with your people.
This is true.
It's true. It's unnatural. And so when you don't have any escape, and, kids now have no boundaries because you're at their beck and call 24/7. So if you're in the middle of a Zoom or you're on a work call, they just come barging in. Why shouldn't they ask you the question they want to ask you right when they want to ask you?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we could see it in your book, Invisible as Air, glimpses of what could happen to people. And, so leave it to the children, Teddy and Crystal. And I loved her.
Yes, she's great.
Do you know a Crystal? Did you know a Crystal?
I never knew one personally, but I do love an underdog. And so that's what I wanted to explore with her. And I also wanted to talk about her experience and the class differences and how this drug knows no class. Everybody is a victim of it, no matter race, class. I mean, it starts with a doctor's prescription, it's perfectly legal until it's not. And I wanted to also, I have a brother who's older than I am, and I watched him fall in love with many Gentile women. I wanted to. And I know that's coming from my boys. So I wanted to get ready by writing a character who transcended all the thoughts probably that people have of her initially.
I'll just share with you that, obviously I've been raised as a Gentile, but through my entire life, most of my friends have been Jewish. And the rabbi at our synagogue in New Bedford, when he came in, he thought I was part of the congregation. So he was embracing me. So I'm like the reverse. So when I saw Zadie and Bobby and, all of this, I said, I know these people,
Yeah. Yeah.
So you saw it from your brother's perspective, mm-hmm. But I thought Crystal was like incredible. And
I loved writing about her.
And she really saved that family. And I thought that was very cool that she did. And maybe you want to tell some of the audience, her part in all of this.
So Crystal is, at the beginning of the book, Teddy is their 12-year-old son. He's on the cusp of a bar mitzvah. He's a very sincerely sensitive kid, and he loves movies. He watches movies, studies them. His dream is to be a director one day. And, this is a kid that also underwent dire tragedy when he was 10. He was expecting a sister and she didn't show up. And he watched his mom go through it. So he's already got this built-in empathy, which makes him kind of an outlier at school. And so on his way to school, he witnesses a car accident and goes to help, being the good Samaritan that he is, and meets, this goddess, this tall, skinny, blonde, purple mascara, flip-flopped, cut off girl. And they become friends first. And then they fall in love the way that 12-year-olds do. And he tells Crystal about the pills that he's found on his mother. And she tells him that, it's something he should really be concerned about. It's his job to get in there and fight for her. Nobody else is fighting for her. And he doesn't want to, but eventually he does. And even that is not enough to stop her, which is sad, but true. And so he runs away and they all go to find her, and Crystal insists on coming along. And on that trip, they run away to Cumberland. Teddy has run away to Cumberland Island, which is this amazing island in in Georgia, and it's filled with wild horses. I went there with my husband right before we had our second son, and it's magical and strange and just a cool place. So I took them back there to work it out, and Crystal leaves them alone very elegantly, I thought, and lets them work it out.
And you are a very elegant writer too, I have to tell you.
Thank you so much.
And someday we'll get together so that we can, we can hug and kiss and whatever. that means.
Yes.
I would really like that. But I would like to read, because obviously this is heavy, but it isn't. I thought, again, I'll just express, read it, you'll love it. It's beautiful. Zoe captures your heart. She captures your soul, and she captures these characters. So I want to read what Teddy said at his bar mitzvah. I love movies because almost always there's a neat, happy ending tied up in a pretty bow. That's what I think everyone wants after all, to escape from the fact that life not always, almost never is like that. In real life, people die. In real life, people are sad, sometimes forever. In real life, people make big mistakes that have big repercussions, and sometimes those repercussions are impossible to untangle. It's all a big, messy muck, and happy endings are fantasy. But everyone, it seems to me, has their own muck, and the muck can be lonely, but it doesn't have to be. Muck should be shared, because maybe yours is a lot like somebody else's. Or maybe you have very different mucks, but the connection bridges the gap. I'll always love movies for their happy endings, for the hope they provide. But real life has room for hope too, through these kinds of honest and unexpected connections. And as I cross this threshold into my supposed manhood today, I hope I can always believe in this. And this is Invisible as Air by Zoe Fishman, who has authored other books, Inheriting Edith, Driving Lessons, Saving Ruth, and Balancing Acts. And Zoe, what's next on your agenda?
Oh, well, I'm writing, I completed the first draft of my next novel during the pandemic. And as expected, it was horrible, but I did finish. So now I'm rewriting it with tremendous help from my agent and my editor. They gave me great advice. Basically, the ending and the beginning are great, and then there's 300 pages of garbage in between. So I'm fixing it. I mean, but the plot's the same, but the settings are different, and I am very happy with it. And they've been very kind with me in terms of having to extend my deadline. And I have high hopes. This one couldn't be anything but autobiographical because I was spiraling in and out of insanity. It's called The Book Tour, and it's about a mid-list author like myself. And I say mid-list, that means almost getting to the next level, but a slow climb. It's a climb that I'm grateful for, but it would be nice to make a living for my family. That would be nice. So in the same position, people always assume that the book publishers roll out these amazing tours. They don't. You have to pay everything out of pocket. And so I had to do that with Invisible as Air, but I had these wonderful girlfriends, who had me to their hometowns and asked the independent bookstores to host me, and it was wonderful. And then I would go sometimes with the kids, sometimes not. And it was it was wonderful to show the boys, like, okay, I'm back up, I'm back in the saddle, we're doing this is what I do. It was also good to escape them. So in the book, there's a woman, much like me, who's a recent-ish widow, 2 young boys, whose friends do this for her, but it's right before the pandemic hits. So the original draft of the book was written during the pandemic, and it turns out no one wants to read about this hell year that we've experienced. So I just took it a little bit further back, and she travels and she learns things about herself. And in the end, her father is watching the dudes back in New Jersey. In the end, she has to take a road trip with her stepmother that she has issues with back from Atlanta to New Jersey. And that's the end of her journey. It's a riff on Dante's Inferno, but much simpler.
Well, you'll have to come to Bookstore One.
Oh, are you kidding? I'm coming.
And you can stay with us. We'd love to have you come. And obviously there were different bookstores up and down this coast.
Oh, you're the only bookstore I know.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know, but I tell you, you are very brave. You're very brave to even share with us. And, and for everyone who has been on Zoom today, what a great story. And we're glad you're in Florida so you can just soak up that sun and keep your soul happy, which is a great thing. I mean
Thank you so much, Elsie.
You're welcome.
Well, it seems like it might be time, if I'm not mistaken, Elsie and Zoe, to go ahead and open this up to Q&A or discussion. And I invite any of you who want to say something or ask something to unmute. And I can see you all on the screen. So you could, of course, use the hand raise function, but you could just put your hand up and I'll be able to see you. And so anyone want to say or ask anything? Yes, Alice.
Yes, so tell everybody how you took a village for you to write even the first draft and where you write.
Oh, right. So when I was writing the book tour, which is the new book, the boys were not in school. And I have a pretty small house, but I have a garage. And so I would go out to the very not pretty garage. I mean, it's a garage. And my mother and brother would come 2 days a week to sit with the boys in the afternoon. So I'd get like 2.5 hours to write. And then my mother-in-law, Nareet, hi Nareet, would take them overnight occasionally, which is, a gift from God. Because I can do anything, absolutely anything, except be creative with them around. I can't do it. I can't. My mom mode just usurps that particular joy. Can't come out if I need to be attending to other people's needs. It's selfish. Creativity is selfish.
Yeah, that's interesting comments, and it has to be selfish. Otherwise, how can you focus?
Someone, I forget the author who said this, but it was so true. To be a writer, you have to be ruthless. And I think that's exactly right. You can't, that's your job. You're not going to if anyone has the audacity to call it a hobby, when it is in fact your paycheck, then they can jump in a lake. You have to make the time for it. Even if you're not writing professionally, if you love it that much, you just have to sit in the chair for 2 hours a day. I know everyone says this, but it's absolutely true.
Right. Others who want to say something. Yeah, I see Nancy. Nancy. Hi, Nancy.
I am so sorry for your loss, and your story reminds me a little bit of what happened to Sheryl Sandberg. So I'm just wondering if you read her books or if you have been in touch with her. I lost my husband, whose name was David Gold, which is kind of close to her husband, David Goldberg, at about the same time, but obviously I'd been married for 47 years. So I'm just wondering how you got through your grief and what you can share with us.
Well, I'm so sorry for your loss. I never got in touch with her. I tried in the beginning, didn't have any luck, but I definitely received around 27 copies of her book from well-meaning friends. I did, I liked what she had to say. I certainly feel great empathy for her. I thought, what a horrible thing to have in common. A lot of people sent me books in the beginning, and first of all, I was just so exhausted. And second of all, the prescriptive nature without the real internal nonsensical way that grief affects your heart and your mind. I needed both. And I found one book. Is it All the Light We Cannot See? Is that the name of the novel?
Yes. Mhm.
I like that one.
Mm.
And that was the only one that really resonated with me. And I read a lot of them. And I have, again, tried to get in touch with her. It didn't work out. I think that, I've often thought about this, why I haven't, my story hasn't exploded across the universe, because certainly I have kind of the tools to do that. And I think the universe is looking out for me.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think it's a slow drip, and that's okay, because grief is a slow drip.
Well, I wish you a wonderful future and keep
Thank
writing.
you, Nancy. You too. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add to the discussion? Yeah, Nancy Zimmerman.
Yeah. So you've written several other books which really resonated with me. And two of them I thought this particular audience might be particularly interested in. One of them is Inheriting Edith, which touches on growing older and taking responsibility. And maybe you can just give a 2
Sure.
second précis about that. But the other one also is very timely because we're talking a lot in our country about race. And
Yeah.
it's a book you wrote quite a while ago in your many years of writing. And it's about going back to a Southern town after I guess it must be a freshman summer, and seeing things differently. And that really, I think, is very timely and topical. Those are two. I wonder if you can just say a tiny bit
Sure.
about either of those.
Sure. Thank you, Nancy. Inheriting Edith is about a woman, a single mom in her mid-30s, who is asked by a former mentor in her will after she dies to inherit her beautiful beach house in Sag Harbor in the Hamptons. But the catch is that it comes with her 82-year-old mother, who is in early onset Alzheimer's. And it's a story about secrets and insecurities and family. And I really enjoyed writing the bridge between 82 and 42. And that one has performed incredibly well. I'm shocked and amazed and grateful. It sold very well all over the country and even internationally in Israel. And Saving Ruth is probably she's just my baby. When I started out in publishing, I worked in the publishing industry first. And so my first book, Balancing Acts, is great, but it's not my idea. The idea for Women in a Yoga Class came from inside HarperCollins. And with that idea, I grew the characters in the story in Brooklyn. But Saving Ruth is really, again, a story kind of about my own experience. I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. I was a Jew. Nobody looked like me. Nobody seemed to have the ambition that I did. And I went away to college and I did all the stupid things college kids do. And then I came home for the summer and lifeguarded at the pool I've been lifeguarding in my whole life, and saw the racism up close. And I also saw myself as a way I had a voice. I was going to use it. I wasn't just going to laugh quietly while the N-word was bandied about. So I'm doing that in that book, trying to figure out what I can do as someone who has felt like an outsider, but without the burden of Black people, obviously. And I'm also the girl in the book is suffering an eating disorder. So they're kind of tied into each other. Plus she has a relationship with her brother that's growing, and the brother is growing up too. And it's not exactly my family, because my family would have killed me if I had been too forthcoming. So I did pull some things back, but it's my story. And thank you, Nancy. That's very kind of you.
Yeah, who else would like to say or ask? Yes, Alice.
Yes, I have another question. I think it's the librarian in me. too. So can you explain, so you sent in your first draft and you get it back, and how exactly is it conveyed to you that ditch the middle? I mean, I know all about the editor's marks and all of that, but do you have a conversation? Is it written? How is
It's
this
a
a
letter.
work thing?
It's a letter. First they deliver a pile of flaming feces to your doorstep. And then you open the door and I'm just kidding. No, you get a letter and it says, I like the beginning, the ending is wonderful, but the middle sucks. I mean, that's basically what happens. So this is the first letter you get is about the structure. Is the book moving? Is the plot servicing the characters? Is the tone the same throughout? Are you staying in the proper character's head, or have you gone off to Mars? So for me, the middle of the book was taking place during COVID. That trip turned into a road trip for the protagonist. And it turns out that road trips, unless you're Jack Kerouac, are very hard to write. They're not interesting because you're in a car. There's only so many times you can turn the blinker on, So we talked about it. And at first I thought, no, this was such an important time in history. And I want people to feel that sense of desperation and complete unknowingness. But then I realized that the beauty of fiction is that you can tweak it so that the normal appears somewhat abnormal. Because even if I'm right, and I always write about everyday occurrences, but something has to elevate it, or else why bother? And so I decided that by bringing in the stepmother character was new, the father was new, by bringing in these shades of her, I could not only make her more interesting, but the story more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, Alice again.
So we talked yesterday about how important describing the scene is, how Alice Hoffman does it, in my opinion, so beautifully. How your father encouraged you to put more of that in your book. So how do you can't just say, well, the trees are particularly green today. How do you teach yourself? How did you those
I
descriptions?
weave it into dialogue. So I weave it into dialogue. So in just an example would be Zoe answered Alice's question as the fog poured in over the bridge that she was looking at from the back porch of her friends. That's how I do it as people are talking, and sort of to keep the conversation moving. If you sprinkle it with details of where the conversation is happening on both ends, then I think you get a full picture of what's happening for all the people involved in the story. But I used to not, I've had to learn to do that.
So I'll say that I think you also have a great gift. And I see you going to the next tier because your writing is profound, and you do find, as we were saying about these words, and they just, that's a gift you have. When did you start writing? Were you a little girl when you started this trek?
I did. I started.
Oh,
I know. My parents were very, very, they encouraged me. Well, they forced me. So I began reading. My mom and her mother took me to the library all the time, and I loved reading. My mom's an avid reader, and my father would make me write book reports, and eventually that turned into short stories. And I always loved it. It's really the only thing I've ever been confident in. I know how to write. I can write. It needs to be improved, certainly, but I can write. So
Oh,
yeah,
and
it's
when
nice to have
you,
had that.
and when you were at BU, were you an English major or what did you major in?
English
you were.
major, advertising minor, yeah.
Oh, I love it. See
But
that?
I never took a creative writing class, which I regret.
Oh, I
Well-
think you're doing okay.
Yeah, don't
Thanks.
regret that. Don't regret that because that now you have your own style, Zoe. Not
Thank
something
you.
that was imposed upon you, I think, in a class. So that's what makes you so special. So
Thank you.
who else? I see Pamela. Your name is as Pamela, is that
Yeah.
right?
That's right. Thank you. So I just wanted to say you are so relatable, and I can't wait to read your book, Invisible as Air.
Thank you.
Yeah, so appreciate you speaking with us today and sharing. And I think books that deal with grief are really important for all of us. Have our own grief. It comes in many forms, but I think when you can read about it from someone who makes it relatable, I'm sure your book is as relatable as you are. It helps us kind of work through that. And so I think that's a real important gift for people. But I also wanted to ask you, do you feel in all of your books, all of your writings, do you pull from do you always pull some bit from personal experience or people in your life?
Well, thank you, first of all. That's very nice of you to say. I pull, my first 3 books were very much about me. And Driving Lessons was a third of the 3, and it did not sell well. I mean, I was also writing it when I was pregnant with my first kid and not concentrating the way that I should have been. And when I finished that book and it tanked, the writing was on the wall that I had to knock it out of the park with the next one, or else I was going to say goodbye to my career, which I am so grateful for. I used to be an agent, so I know how hard it is to get published. And I knew if I dropped the ball, how would I ever pick it up again? So I decided with Inheriting Edith to go bigger and not write a story about my life. And I did, but inevitably, people I know came into the story. My own self came into the story. My kids came into the story because there's a little girl. And so I think the idea of setting up a framework that involves research where you go beyond your immediate experience is great, but there's no way that I can't pepper it with pieces of myself, because then it comes off as not authentic. And I think that avid readers know authentic when they see it, and it's important.
Thank you.
Yeah. Others who want to join the conversation.
So when will you go to Israel? I think you're a star there. I think we have to go there very soon. As soon
Noreen,
as
when are
this
we
is over.
going?
Very soon. Once the pandemic is over, I think we should go.
Yeah, we
Oh,
would love
yes.
to go.
Yeah.
Noreen is my mother-in-law, and her mother, Lavana, turns 100 next April. So it would be my absolute joy to go then.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And you're a star, so this is good.
Yeah.
Yes, star.
Yeah.
Well, if there are no other questions, we could entertain another one or two. Nurit?
Yeah, I don't have a questions. Whenever I have a questions, I ask her day and night. But I have a comment to make. Elsie, I have a comment for you that I've been in a lot. I mean, in every interview that Zoe had, or in town, I've been to all of them. And I have to say that this is the most interesting, fulfilling interview that very interesting that you put, and I enjoyed it very, very much.
Oh,
Extremely,
thank you.
extremely.
Thank you,
I mean,
Noreen.
the depth that you are going in, the questions, it's almost like you feel it. And it's
Mhm.
not just interview back and forth. It's just, you put a lot into it, and it shows. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
let's applaud.
And
Let's
so,
unmute
and
and
Yay,
applaud both
Elsie.
I
Zoe
have
and
something to
Elsie.
say to Zoe also.
Yeah.
It's not a question, Zoe.
Okay.
It's not easy, but I can see Ronan, my son, her husband, Ronan, dropping everything for each interview that you have with a huge smile on his face and will not miss it in the world. And I'm sure that he's here with us and we miss him a lot. But
Thank you, Noreen.
he's pushing you to continue to have the most amazing kids.
Oh.
And you are the best mom in the world.
Oh,
And just keep your success. We're behind you.
thank you, Noreen. I love you so much.
I love you too.
I love these people. Mwah, I love you all. I know. And I think I mentioned that I had lost my son, and this is March Madness, and tonight is the final game of this, of basketball season. And my son, he loved every sport in the world, whether it was rugby to whatever. So he's with me today, as I watch the game tonight. I know he's here, so I totally understand what you're saying. So only you could have written this book. And I encourage people, to read it, to share it with people, and we'll go on.
Thank you so much, Elsie.
I love you.
Oh, thank you. I love you too. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Guys, bye,
you,
Noreen.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.